On a quiet January morning in 2026, the world was stunned by a development that few had anticipated, yet many had feared for years. The air was thick with uncertainty as breaking news alerts flashed across screens in every corner of the globe, signaling a seismic shift in international affairs. The United States had launched a swift and decisive military operation in Venezuela, toppling President Nicolas Maduro's government in a matter of hours. American armored vehicles rolled through the streets of Caracas, and elite forces quickly secured key government buildings, including the presidential palace, where the U.S. flag was soon seen flying alongside Venezuela's own. This mission, orchestrated in utmost secrecy by the Trump administration, was the result of months of covert planning and intelligence gathering. High-level officials met behind closed doors, poring over digital maps and classified documents, weighing the risks and potential fallout. When the order was finally given, the operation unfolded with remarkable precision and, at least initially, minimal open conflict. As news of Maduro's removal spread, Caracas fell eerily silent. Residents peered anxiously from behind curtains, uncertain of what the future would hold. Small groups gathered in public squares, whispering rumors and fears, while others stayed indoors, waiting for any sign of what might come next. The operation achieved its immediate objective. Maduro was apprehended and taken into custody. But the aftermath was anything but simple. News anchors around the world reported on the dramatic turn of events, while international leaders scrambled to respond. Legal experts pored over documents, debating the implications of such a bold intervention. The U.S. administration justified the intervention as a necessary step to end Venezuela's deepening humanitarian crisis and to confront Maduro's alleged involvement in drug trafficking. Humanitarian aid convoys began arriving, and anti-narcotics operations intensified, as American officials insisted their actions were both moral and strategic. Yet, the operation's legality was immediately called into question. The lack of congressional approval in Washington and the absence of a clear international mandate sparked heated debates in the U.S. Capitol and at the United Nations. Legal scholars and diplomats warned of the dangerous precedent being set, and many wondered about the long-term consequences for both Venezuela and the global order. Critics, both at home and abroad, cautioned that removing Maduro without a clear plan for what would follow risked creating a dangerous power vacuum. Political analysts debated the wisdom of the move, while protesters in Caracas demanded answers, and empty government offices stood as stark reminders of the uncertainty gripping the nation. As global headlines chronicled the unfolding crisis, diplomats met in tense sessions, and the lights of Caracas flickered late into the night. The world now watched anxiously, wondering what steps the United States would take next to stabilize Venezuela and prevent the country from spiraling into even deeper chaos. In Washington, Democratic lawmakers erupted in anger, accusing the Trump administration of deceiving Congress. They recalled classified briefings where officials flatly denied any plans for military intervention in Venezuela. Democrats charged that the administration had deliberately misled them, bypassing congressional oversight and silencing debate. Senator Jeanne Shaheen and others accused the White House of a pattern of secrecy and dishonesty. The secrecy, they argued, robbed Congress of its constitutional role and prevented a national conversation about the risks and consequences. Outrage spilled onto social media, with Democrats calling the operation an illegal war for regime change and oil. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer quickly emerged as the face of the opposition, stepping into the spotlight at a critical moment. As tensions mounted in Washington, Schumer's voice grew louder, channeling the concerns of his party and the American public. He positioned himself as a steadfast advocate for transparency and accountability, determined to hold the administration to the highest standards. Schumer revealed that, despite attending multiple classified briefings alongside his colleagues, they were repeatedly assured that no military action was imminent. These briefings, meant to keep lawmakers informed, instead left them feeling misled and sidelined from crucial decisions. Outraged by the administration's lack of transparency, Schumer took to the press, condemning the secrecy and demanding a full Senate briefing. He insisted on a thorough explanation of the operation's rationale and its legal justification, arguing that the American people deserved to know the truth behind such consequential actions. Schumer's call for accountability quickly galvanized Democrats, uniting them around a common cause. He framed the issue as a fundamental breach of trust between the executive branch and Congress, warning that unchecked power threatened the very foundation of American democracy. Senator Jack Reed, a leading voice on military affairs, echoed Schumer's concerns. He warned of the dangers of nation-building without a clear plan, drawing on past lessons and expressing fears of a costly, open-ended entanglement that could drain resources and risk American lives. Across party lines, lawmakers insisted on a reset in executive legislative communication, emphasizing the need for honest dialogue and shared decision-making on matters of war and peace. They argued that Congress must not be left in the dark when the stakes are so high. Many warned that a dangerous precedent had been set, one where the president could launch military interventions in secret, bypassing the checks and balances that define the American system of government. The demand from Congress was clear and unwavering: restore congressional authority, re-establish trust, and prevent future unilateral actions that could put the nation at risk without proper oversight. The Trump administration defended its secrecy, citing the need for operational security. President Trump argued that sharing details with Congress risked leaks that could endanger U.S. troops and the mission. Secretaries Rubio and Hegseth claimed their denials to Congress were strategic, meant to mislead not just lawmakers, but also the Maduro regime. The administration insisted that, in covert operations, full candor isn't always possible. Trump declared the operation a victory for American security, hinting at possible further military involvement in Venezuela. Critics' constitutional concerns were dismissed as secondary to mission success. The administration's message, "The ends justified the means." This set up a direct clash between executive authority and congressional oversight. Republicans largely praised the operation, calling it a long-overdue move against a corrupt regime. Senate Majority Leader John Thune framed it as a law enforcement action to bring Maduro to justice. Some Republicans saw the strike as a warning to other authoritarian regimes in the region. However, a few voiced caution about deeper military involvement, reflecting constituents' wariness of foreign entanglements. Representative Miller Meeks warned against sending U.S. troops, echoing isolationist concerns. Overall, Republican support shielded the administration from political isolation. The debate quickly became another partisan battle, with each side viewing the operation through a sharply different lens. The Venezuela operation reignited the debate over war powers in American governance. The Constitution grants Congress the sole authority to declare war, a safeguard against unilateral executive action. Critics saw the secret mission as a blatant overreach, bypassing the constitutional process. The administration argued that the president's commander-in-chief role and the need for speed justified secrecy. This tug-of-war has a long history, from Korea to Libya, with Congress often struggling to assert its authority. The core question: does removing a foreign leader by force require congressional approval? The Senate now faced pressure to act, with the issue thrust to the center of the national agenda. In response, the Senate scheduled a crucial vote to block further military action in Venezuela without explicit congressional approval. The measure would prohibit the Pentagon from escalating hostilities or deploying ground troops without consent. This was more than a response to Venezuela. It was a statement about Congress's role in war and peace. The vote would force senators to declare whether they supported unilateral presidential action or demanded congressional oversight. Democrats were united, but needed Republican support to pass the measure. Some Republicans, wary of unchecked executive power, were key swing votes. The outcome would signal whether Congress could reclaim its war-making authority. The stakes: constrain the president's options, or endorse unilateral action in future crises. As Washington debated, Venezuela was gripped by uncertainty. Caracas was eerily quiet, its people anxious and unsure of what would come next. Years of turmoil had left the population exhausted. Maduro's removal was seismic, but the future remained unclear. The international community reacted with concern, fearing instability and a diplomatic vacuum. For ordinary Venezuelans, the questions were immediate. Would life improve, or would foreign intervention bring new hardships? The lack of a clear transition plan fueled anxiety about power struggles and foreign control. With various factions vying for influence, the country's fate hung in the balance. Venezuelans now waited, their future shaped by decisions made far from home. The U.S. operation thrust Venezuela and American foreign policy into uncharted territory. raising questions about the limits of American influence and the unpredictable consequences of intervention. For decades, Venezuela had been a flashpoint in Latin America, but this moment marked a dramatic escalation, with the world's attention now fixed on Washington's next move. The Trump administration now faced mounting pressure from both allies and critics to present a real, actionable plan for Venezuela's transition and recovery. The stakes were high, not just for Venezuelans, but for the credibility of U.S. leadership in the region. Behind closed doors, officials debated strategies, weighing humanitarian aid, sanctions, and diplomatic efforts against the risks of deeper involvement. Meanwhile, Congress, led by Democrats, vowed to intensify oversight and limit further military action. Lawmakers demanded transparency and accountability, warning against repeating the mistakes of past interventions. The debate in Washington grew more heated, reflecting deep divisions over how best to support democracy abroad while protecting American interests. The Senate vote was just the beginning of a larger struggle over war powers and foreign policy. Senators from both parties questioned the administration's authority to act unilaterally, sparking a renewed conversation about the constitutional balance between Congress and the president in matters of war and peace. The stakes were enormous. A successful transition could be a triumph for democracy and stability in Latin America. But failure risked plunging Venezuela into a costly quagmire, with ripple effects across the region. Neighboring countries braced for potential refugee flows and economic disruption, while Venezuelans faced daily uncertainty and hardship. The administration also had to manage international fallout and build support for a post-Maduro Venezuela. Diplomatic efforts intensified as the U.S. sought to rally allies and persuade skeptical nations to back a peaceful transition. The challenge was not only to remove a regime, but to help lay the groundwork for a stable democratic future. The choices made in the coming weeks, by U.S. leaders, the international community, and Venezuelans themselves, would determine the nation's fate. Every decision carried weight, shaping not just Venezuela's future, but the broader trajectory of U.S. policy in the hemisphere. The world watched as Venezuela stood at a crossroads, its future uncertain, its destiny now a global concern. As events unfolded, the hopes and fears of millions hung in the balance, reminding us that the path forward would be anything but simple.